So imagine this. Life throws you a curveball,
Mhm.
then another one,
Mhm.
and maybe another one after that, until it feels less like a game and more like, ooh, like the whole structure you're standing on is just crumbling down all at
A
once.
simultaneous, unscripted demolition, sort of multiple core parts of your life.
That's exactly what we're diving into today. We've been looking through this collection of reflections and some really raw conversations that came about from one person's experience.
Right. Someone who went through a period where several major external things, the supports in her life, they just seemed to collapse
Yeah.
at the same time.
Yeah, and these sources, they capture not just how hard that was, but also something pretty unexpected that happened within it.
Definitely.
So our mission for this deep dive is really to explore what happens when that external scaffolding of our lives just falls away.
How do you even find your footing then? When everything's
Yeah.
shifting or just gone?
Exactly. We're going to pull out these specific insights from these personal accounts, these sources, and see what they reveal about navigating that kind of, profound uncertainty and chaos.
Okay, so the situation described in the source it's incredibly intense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't like a slow, gradual thing. It
Yeah.
was this multi-front unraveling. We're talking sudden, unexpected loss, big shifts in key personal relationships, significant financial uncertainty, and all the related anxieties, about legal things or status insecurities. It was a lot.
That just sounds overwhelming, like multiple foundations just giving way at the same moment.
Right.
And the sources really stressed this wasn't a slow burn, huh?
No, not at all. The language they use is quite striking, actually.
Yeah.
It felt in the moment like the sudden start of some high-stakes drama.
That it was real.
Absolutely real, yeah. It paints this really vivid picture of, like, standing on supports that just get kicked out from under you. No warning.
And yet, okay, here's where the sources get really interesting, I think. What was highlighted as truly remarkable was the way this friend talked about it. Amidst all that pressure, the fear, the potential for just despair,
Yeah.
there was this undercurrent of calm, a sense of presence, and even like fleeting moments of weird, dark amusement.
Which feels completely counterintuitive, right? When your world's basically on fire.
Yeah.
Where does that come from?
That's exactly what grabbed me in the sources, too. One account quotes her saying something like, she felt like she was watching her own life unfold, like a movie, some crazy drama she couldn't look away from. And the person she was talking to, they picked up on this right away. They saw it as evidence of a perspective that wasn't totally lost inside the crisis.
Ah, okay, so she could also observe it happening.
Yeah.
And this points right to a concept that sources keep coming back to, this idea of the witnessing mind.
The witnessing mind.
Yeah. And it's not about being emotionally detached or like denying the pain. Not at all. It's more this profound ability to recognize that you are more than just the person having the awful experience or the person swept up in the chaos.
Here's something else, too.
They're also, at the same time, the awareness that is seeing the experience happen, the one noticing it all.
Okay, let's lean into that, because it feels like a subtle difference, maybe. But you're saying, based on these sources, it's absolutely critical when everything's falling apart. Why?
Well, the sources suggest our most common reactions to crisis are pretty primal, right? Either we frantically try to grab onto the collapsing structures.
Just try to control everything.
Exactly. Try to control the uncontrollable. Or we just collapse ourselves.
Yeah.
Feel completely overwhelmed, like the weight is just too much.
Right, survival modes.
Understandable survival responses, definitely. But what these accounts reveal is that in moments of really extreme pressure, another possibility can actually emerge.
Okay.
There can be this subtle, maybe sometimes just momentary shift in identity.
A shift in identity.
Yeah. You move from being solely of the storm,
Yeah.
like lost inside it, to also being the part of you that is watching the storm, observing its intensity, noticing the fear, the uncertainty, but also noticing the quiet act of seeing itself.
So it's not stopping the storm, but recognizing you aren't just the storm. It sounds a bit like zooming out inside your own head. Is that fair?
This is a pretty good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
It's noticing my heart is racing rather than just being, I am terrified. That little bit of space, that's the key.
Okay.
And the sources describe this witnessing awareness, the simple act of seeing, as fundamentally important. It's not passive detachment. It's framed as the ground, the foundation from which clarity, insight, and, potentially kind of rebirth can emerge.
A stillness that wasn't dependent on those external structures that fell away.
Exactly. It was always there.
The sources also connect this intense shaking, this life structure shaking, to the idea that the self isn't this fixed, solid thing we often think it is.
Right. More like a process.
Yeah, a process. And maybe the crisis isn't a failure, but a necessary. Fire, is that the word they use?
Yes, that's the metaphor used, of fire. A necessary burning away of the patterns, the habits, the assumptions, the external things we rely on.
Things that can no longer hold.
Or perhaps things that were built on a foundation that wasn't truly stable to begin with. The fire feels destructive, obviously, but it clears the way.
That sounds terrifying, though, being burned away. And the sources mention this feeling can lead to something called great doubt. This isn't just regular indecision.
Oh, far from it. No, this
Yeah.
isn't worrying about, what to have for dinner or if you sent that email.
Okay.
The sources describe great doubt as this profound existential questioning that comes up when the structures that defined you are just gone.
Like, who am I without this job, without this relationship?
Exactly. What is life itself when all the familiar anchors are pulled up? Deep stuff.
So it feels like you're maybe losing your mind, but these sources frame it differently.
Completely differently. It's framed not as some psychological problem you need to fix, but as a gate.
A gate.
Yeah, like a threshold. It doesn't swing open to easy answers, though.
Hmm?
It opens by demanding presence. It forces you to confront reality, like directly, because there's nowhere left to hide.
Presence. Even when you're terrified. The sources give a really powerful example of how this actually played out for the friend, right?
They do, yeah. She talked about those initial waves of terror, the feeling she might lose everything, her home, her security, her whole place in the world.
Understandable.
Totally. But she described noticing that alongside the fear, there was this growing ability to simply see what needed to be done, like practically.
And she started taking action.
Yes, but crucially, not from a place of frantic control. The sources really emphasize this. She just started with the immediate, small, practical steps.
Like what?
Making one difficult phone call, sending one necessary email, reaching out to one person who might help, just the next right thing. And the fear didn't magically vanish.
All right.
The sources are very clear about that.
It was still there.
Oh, yeah. But she could see what was needed and do it. Even with the fear present, it was almost like the fear was, riding shotgun, but presence was driving the car.
That distinction feels incredibly important. So the teaching distilled from this, based on what we're seeing in the sources, is that when the future becomes utterly unknowable, when the big stories you live by just collapse, you're forced back to what is known.
The simple, undeniable realities of right now, the present moment.
Right.
The fact that you are here now, your body just as it is in this moment. The simple act of breathing, the single immediate next step right in front of you. It's this radical return to the ground of being.
And action then flows not from trying to force some specific outcome in a chaotic future you can't predict, but from the clarity that arises from simply being present with what is right here, right now.
Precisely. And there's this central paradox highlighted in the sources. Sometimes this kind of external collapse, this intense fire, it isn't actually a failure. It's the necessary catalyst for this clarity to emerge.
Because when the structures you built, maybe on shaky ground, finally crumble,
You realize they were never the true ground anyway.
the real ground was always there, beneath the surface.
Yes. The sources describe it in ways that point to something, something silent, still, and yet vibrantly alive.
Like awareness.
You can call it awareness, you can call it the witness, the names just point towards it.
Yeah.
But the reality is something you touch directly when everything else falls away.
Oh.
It's that quiet knowing that it persists even when your identity feels like it's being completely burned down.
So, okay, let's bring this home. If you are listening right now and you find yourself in your own season of collapse, your own personal storm, or maybe that fire, what does this deep dive guided by these sources really offer you?
Well, I think it offers this core insight discovered through this kind of intense experience.
Yeah.
You are not identical to the chaos you're experiencing. You are not just the storm.
Right.
You are also fundamentally the awareness that sees it. You are the witness observing the storm from a place that is maybe strangely untouched by its violence.
And from that simple, profound act of seeing, from returning to that inner ground, something new can begin to take shape.
Exactly, something profoundly real.
It might not be easy, though. It certainly won't follow your old plans,
Right.
right? And it probably won't happen overnight.
No, absolutely not. But the sources suggest it can be a life built on a foundation that is authentically yours.
Right.
Maybe for the very first time. They really want you, the listener, to know you're not alone in feeling like your world is falling apart.
Even in the heart of that fire, there can be stillness. Even in the midst of destruction, a path can be perceived,
Right.
just step by simple step.
And sometimes, just perhaps, the breaking of those old structures, the collapse of what felt so solid, that might turn out to be the unexpected blessing.
The potential for regeneration found not in frantically rebuilding the old walls, but in connecting with that inner witness, that ground that was always there. That perspective feels like a lifeline, doesn't it? Especially when everything external is in free fall.
It absolutely does. And I think the sources leave us with this thought to maybe just sit with what feels like the absolute end of everything. The complete shattering of what was known might just be the most unexpected origin point. The beginning of something fundamentally new and maybe fundamentally more true for you. The destruction reveals a deeper, more solid foundation that was always present, just patiently waiting beneath all the rubble.